Welcome to Lesson 43, Simplifying Rational Expressions. Just a reminder that a rational expression is an expression that has a variable in the denominator of a fraction. So what we're going to be looking at today is just simplifying them and pulling out the undefined numbers for the denominator, or the undefined values for the variable in the denominator. So just a reminder that a fraction with 0 on the top divided by a number is always equal to 0, but a fraction with 0 on the bottom of the fraction is undefined. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples here. The first one, 2x plus 3x, we're just determining the values for which the expression is undefined. So what I usually do is I just take the denominator and set the whole denominator not equal to 0, so that it can't be equal to 0. And then I solve for x. So I would divide by 3. And of course we know that 0 divided by 3 is 0, so x cannot be 0. So that's the undefined value for x in A. The second one, we have x minus 7 as our denominator, so we're going to set that equal to 0 and solve for x. So I would add 7 on both sides, and then I would have x cannot be 7. And the reason for that is if I plug 7 in for x, 7 minus 7 is 0, and I can't have 0 on the bottom of my fraction. And the last one here, we have 5x minus 15 cannot be equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 15 on both sides. And then I'll have 5x cannot be equal to 15. And then I would divide by 5 on both sides. I ran out of space here at the bottom. So x cannot be 15 divided by 5, which is 3. Moving on to a couple more examples here. We're going to simplify the expression first and then determine the undefined values. So to simplify, what you want to do is pull out the greatest common factor for the numerator and denominator. So the greatest common factor in the numerator for 27x plus 9 is 9. So I would pull that out, and then 27 divided by 9 is 3, and then we have an x, plus 9 divided by 9 is 1. Okay, and then the greatest common factor for the denominator is none. So the denominator is just going to stay x minus 10. So that is our simplified expression. We cannot cancel anything out because there's no factors that are in common. You can only cancel things that are factors and being multiplied. So this is our final answer for the simplified expression. Now we have to figure out what the undefined term is for x. So we're going to take the denominator, x minus 10, and set it equal to 0. So I would add 10 on both sides to isolate x. Then I'd have x cannot be 10. So that's the second part of my answer. Okay, the next example, we're going to pull out the greatest common factor for the numerator first, and that is 4, and they both have at least one x. So I'll pull out 4x. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, and x squared divided by x is x, minus 4 divided by 4 is 1, and x divided by x is 1, so I would just have a 1 there in that place. Okay, and the greatest common factor in the denominator looks like it would be 4x also, because they both have at least one x, so I'm going to pull out 4x on the bottom also. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, and x squared divided by x is just x, plus 8 divided by 4 is 2, and x divided by x is 1, so we just have a 2. Now you can see that we have 4x is being multiplied by something. 4 times x times the quantity of 2x minus 1. So if we were to separate all these into factors, we would have 4x and 2x minus 1. And on the bottom we'd have 4x and 3x plus 2. So anything that is a factor and being multiplied can be canceled. So we can cancel 4 and 4. 4 divided by 4 become 1. X divided by x would become 1. And then we're left with 2x minus 1 on the top and 3x plus 2 on the bottom. So that is our simplified equation. Now we have to set both denominators from the original and the simplified version of the denominators to 0. So 12x squared plus 8x and 3x plus 2 cannot be 0. That was a bad 0 here. Okay, so let's start with the first one, 12x squared plus 8x. Now, in both of these terms, the number is being multiplied by x. So if we fill in 0 for x, we would have 0 plus 0, which equals 0. So that tells me that x cannot be 0, because it would make the denominator 0. For the other one, though, we have to solve for x here. So we would subtract 2 on both sides and then divide by 3. So we would have x cannot be negative 2/3. And that's the rest of our answer there. For the next example, we're again going to pull out the greatest common factor for both the numerator and the denominator. So for the numerator, it looks like we have 7 can go into both 7 and 21, and there's at least one x in both. So we'd pull out 7x. So left in parentheses, we would have 7 divided by 7 is 1, and x squared divided by x is x. And then 21 divided by 7 is 3, and x divided by x is 1, so we would just have 3. On the bottom, what happened there? Okay, on the bottom we'd have the greatest common factor would be 5. 5 goes into 5 and 15, and they don't both have an x, so we can't pull out x. So we would just pull out 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and then we have the x left. And then 15 divided by 5 is 3. So we have x plus 3 and x plus 3. Now again, if we separate these into factors, we'd have 7 times x plus 3, and 5 times x plus 3. Now because these factors, x plus 3 and x plus 3, are exactly the same, then we can cancel them. They would equal 1 when divided. So that would leave us with 7x over 5. And that would be our simplified expression. Then we need to set both 5x plus 15, which is the original denominator, equal to 0, not equal to 0. And then the new denominator is just 5, so obviously that can't be 0, it's 5. There's no variable. So we need to solve for x over here, subtract 15 on both sides, and then we'd have 5x cannot be negative 15. And then divide by 5. So we would have x cannot be negative 3. Now the reason we have to do that is because if anyone were to plug in negative 3 in the original equation, it would make it undefined, even though the simplified version doesn't have a variable anymore. Okay, and one last example here. It's a story problem. The distance a car has traveled is equal to 8.1 t plus 0.9 t squared. It took 1.8 t squared seconds to travel that far. What is the velocity? So velocity is going to be distance over time, just like speed. So we'll plug in what we have. The distance is equal to 8.1 t plus 0.9 t squared. Now be careful not to get your addition symbols confused with your t's. And on the bottom, the time it took was 1.8 t squared. All right, so it says to put it in simplest form, so we need to pull out the greatest common factor on the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to look at these, I'm going to just take out the decimal and look at it as 81 and 9. Because if I were to move the decimal over to the right on each of these, it would be 81, 9, and 18. So what goes into both 81 and 9 is 9, so I'll pull out the 0.9. And then they both have at least one t. So we're going to be left with 81 divided by 9 is 9. So 8.1 divided by 0.9 is 9. And then we would have plus 0.9 divided by 0.9 would be 1. T squared divided by t would just be t. Okay, and on the bottom we'd have 1.8 still and t squared. So now I can cancel. 0.9 goes into 0.9 one time, and 0.9 goes into 1.8 two times, because 9 goes into 18 twice. And then t goes into t once. T goes into t squared would cancel out to be t. Okay, so on the top, I'm out of room, so I'm going to write up here above it, I have 9 plus t, and on the bottom I have 2t. So this is my simplified expression, and then I have to figure out what t cannot be to make the denominator 0, because it's all multiplication. Whenever it's all multiplication and no addition or subtraction, then the variable cannot be 0, because anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So t cannot be 0. And that's today's lesson. Thank you for taking notes and listening.